first 5 minutes is people just dawdling in anyway. It's no big deal.
Right, let's make sure we're all live. All live.
But no. We're live now anyway, so it's all good to go. Poor Owen. If we're just sitting down to what was that, in an hour's time, he'll probably join us. Like,
yeah, well, yeah, about half an hour, 45 minutes to be like, right, guys, you ready for this? I'm ready for when you're done, mate.
Sure, we're already live right now, and I wouldn't mind. It was sure, this is his topic on what is the Irish identity as well.
This is mine.
Oh, it's yours. You wanted to run with the Irish identity one.
I wanted to run with the Irish identity. I thought it would be good for Owen, like to get into and have Owen on to talk to him about it. But he obviously just felt like it was above him, you know.
That's it. Like,
and just do you know what? I'm going to my channel, but my YouTube just brings up your channel the minute I like log in. Like it.
That's good. That's what you want, like. Just dominate all, like. Oh my god! We'll waffle shy as people are coming into the chat there until eventually we'll have people cheating and chatting away. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you as well, Michal. I got the. I'm finally being paid. By the way, did I tell you what was the problem?
I think you sent me a message or a screenshot saying that it was something to do with you had 2 AdSenses or something.
They hooked up a random one, and it was because someone was getting the coding off. I won't say too much here because someone will probably get upset and stuff. But yeah, so they kept putting in the 12-digit code. And how's the lads doing tonight? Can you hear us loud and clear? Can you? But yeah, they kept putting in the code wrong. And well, it's not that they kept putting in the code wrong. The code was just wrong, and they weren't checking it. So they turned around to me and says, "Oh, there's nothing wrong." And they were doing this for a good few years, weren't they, Michal? But somebody decided. I was talking, and I messaged them again, just as my routine annoyance at them. And I had this guy talk back to me, and straight away he was. What was it called? Straight away, like he was talking very calm, relaxed and stuff. And he was like, yeah, this seems a bit strange. All right. I'll do the check. So he checked. He was like, just give me 5 minutes or so and I'll just check through all the list. And he went over to do his checks anyway. And he was like, oh, wait, somebody put in a 6 instead of an 8. I'll just change that there. And he changed it to a 6 to an 8. And what was it called? Started working, all connected back up properly. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And it was literally in a blink of a second. He literally just pressed enter and he was flying like.
Owen's on his way. He did what I did. And thought
the old daylight savings.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it was just, are you getting back paid?
Hopefully, but their terms and conditions is no back pay, but they did say that they would have back pay for me, so it's no big deal anyway. Like, but what else was I going to bloody say? Oh yeah, daylight savings. Yeah, sure. That's why it's an hour ahead anyway for you guys. Anyway,
an hour early.
It's
an hour early first. Yeah.
Well, an hour early anyway because of the old daylight savings. Not that it matters anyway, because we're still waiting for people to start rocking up and start chatting away to us.
That's because they're all on daylight savings. Basically, this has all happened because in Japan they don't have daylight savings. So yet again, we have to do what Philip wants to do. I mean, he's the one that organizes it all.
Well, you know, to be fair, I think the timer was on my thing for a while, but I'm not sure. Sometimes I organize the time.
I was just sitting there having a cup of tea, taking things nice and.
We were saying this. The daylight savings caught me out too. Yeah, caught me out. So because apparently they don't have it in Japan, so Philip had his normal timing, and and then I just so happened to when you sent the message saying what's the link, and I opened up YouTube and it automatically goes to Philip's page, like as the most recommended or whatever to watch, and it had that recommended line. It said 9 o'clock, and I was like, oh, add expletives here. And I was like, it's 22 now and I haven't got anything ready. And I stood on my camera stand as well, so it's broken. So kind of like wedged my camera now between two more. Yeah, I was an absolute shit show. I should excuse the language.
Anyway. It's only what was it called, a live show where thousands of people watch.
Hi, a bit late. No, Kat, you're right on time.
No, I think everyone must be an hour early, so we'll just talk for the next hour or so, will we? No, I'm joking. But yeah, sure. So what time is it in Ireland right now?
9:05.
9:05. Yeah, sure, that's grand. So you guys get an hour into bed early, so.
Yeah, Owen's lovely.
Around all night.
Time for
because Monday night my daughter was playing up past Killarney county final. They were winning until 1 minute before the end, extra time, and then they lost. Got home at midnight. Up at 7, back up to Killarney yesterday. And then I couldn't sleep last night, and I'm up at 7 again tomorrow.
Oh, it's worked out quite well for you. You've had to rush a cup of tea now, but you'll get a good night's sleep.
Yeah. I have my cup of tea. Fortunately, I had it. Right.
I've got my water here anyway.
I'm in the water too. Although I drank because I didn't get to refill it before I came on because I was rushing. So. We might have to have an interval. You know, if one of you just wants to dance for like 5 minutes while I go refill it, then
there'll be plenty of time anyway for refilling and running away and all that.
Philip can do an impromptu demonstration of his samurai skills.
Oh, you've got a message, Owen. Don't think Owen has his live on. Have you connected?
Connected. Yeah. Your guys are asking for you to connect up your channel there on. It should be up in the top left side.
Hold on.
1 second. I'll check there as well.
Yeah, I'll check as well. It might just be delayed.
Yeah, I just need to click on the on button up on the right side. Owen,
good shot, Dennis.
Channel. Thanks for that, Dennis. Making sure Owen is paid himself. Actually, do you know what? While we're just quickly dashing around the place, I'll turn on my what was the thing so I can start getting paid on that one. Actually, 1 second. But yeah, Michal, the topic on the Irish identity. This is the one that you wanted to get up and started. To start with, which way do you want to go on this subject on what is the Irish identity, or are you just gonna bluff it?
No, I kind of wanted it to be it's something that I've kind of mulled over for a couple of years. The Irish identity through the Middle Ages, almost the concept of nationalism, and obviously most people will know that nationalism is a modern construct, a modern philosophical view, from maybe, and there is different schools of thought, whether it comes in the industrial period, whether it starts to form in the Tudor period, or even we have sort of proto evidence, especially from like an English point of view, should we say, during the 100 Years' War. So what you see is this gradual progression to what nationalistic view today. So the concept of an idea of nationhood, the idea of identity, and I think it ties very much into modern politics when people try to claim a nation or the idea of a nation or ethnicity back to antiquity, and the problems that come with that by tying that, saying that England formed in 927, therefore the English have been around for over 1,000 years, and really, the English weren't really looking at England as England in 927, so you can't really claim that. So see, I suppose it's just the look of but that's a lot of topics really that overlap, and really I just want to say, well, what I came into this and so I thought, well, what were the Irish doing in the early and medieval period? How were they viewing themselves? Were they even viewing themselves as Irish or Gael or Goidel, or but this idea of, did they have an understanding of basically how we view Ireland today as a nation, as a country? Did they have a similar concept? And, if not, then what did they have? And just to build on that, and maybe dispel some modern political myths that sort of have arisen among certain aspects of politics today, and just sort of just educate and learn. So that was my thought process leading into this week.
It's interesting because there is a guy, I think his name is Anthony Smith, and he does work on early nationalism, but you have to differentiate between talking about nationalism as such. Nationalism is the idea that every nation should have a state. So therefore, the Scottish nation should have its state, the Catalonian nation should have its state, the Irish nation should have its state, the Breton nation should have its state, etc., which is a late 18th century, early 19th century concept. But some nations were more centralized, were producing texts much earlier than this, especially in opposition to other nations, like England against France. In Ireland in the late medieval and early modern period, the Old English, the Anglo-Irish, whatever you want to call them, I know we'll discuss that next week, they saw themselves as English. From the time of the Reformation onwards, the English in England were saying, no, you're not English, you're Irish. And the Old English saying, no, we're English. And the Irish are saying they're English, but the English rejected them because they stayed Catholics. The word in Irish for Irish, Erenach, only dates from around 1620, and it was first coined probably in Louvain, now in Belgium, then in the Spanish Netherlands. Until then, you had the idea of Gaelic, which is Gaelic Irish, and Sassenach, or whatever you wanted to call the Old English, the Normans, the Gaeilge. You had a differentiation between Gaelic and everybody else. How this was interpreted changed over time. The view of the nation, the view of what Irish was, changed over time. This is shown well in Keating's First Fassa, where he's trying to say that Irish history was a series of newcomers being integrated and becoming Irish, with the exception of the Protestant English from the late 16th, 17th century.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's a topic that sort of spans centuries and moves and sort of changes shape. And like I said, even how we identify as ourselves, comes from, like you said there, Erenach, and when our Irish, and before that there was Gael or Goidel, or and you have terms as well that whenever you're sort of forming a nation, the very early formations of nations basically seem to form around there being an other. So you have us and them. And they're the formations of the early texts of what we would start to say that this sort of self-awareness, this self-identification as an us versus them. And normally you need an other to do that. For the English, it was the French, possibly, depending on how we just sort of discuss this and depending on what we sort of decide. It could be for us, it could be the heathens, the Norse, or the later English. But you also have what is termed as you have an us and them, but you also have what they call us. So if they a collective term. So let's just say, for an argument, for an early sort of seed for this argument, is that we are referring to ourselves in early texts as the Goidel, as the Gael, as but we are being referred to as the Scotty by others. They are referring to us collectively as a group of people because, well, certain markers like language is the main one very early in medieval. Does that mean that we are a united people? Does that mean we have a concept of nationhood, that we have this idea of an island of Ireland? No, but it's certainly the start of what would become what we have today. So these are obviously, you would have proto-nationalism. So we just span that word into there. It's probably not even a very good word, very generic, but it as a good marker to sort of put in this sort of the discussion of proto Ireland. The seed made Ireland is definitely something. Like I say, it's something I wanted to delve into and use this time. Sorry, I thought you were going to say something there, Phil. Owen.
I think the Irish, at least the Gaelic Irish identity, starts to take form very early, but it goes beyond Ireland. It's the idea of the Gaeltacht, the Gaelic universe, sort of, which includes a large part of Scotland. You can see that when the North start coming in, they're clearly differentiated as not us. When the Anglo-Normans, whatever you want to call them, start coming in, they are not us. The North are starting to be observed, to be absorbed. So the Irish identity, the Gaelic Irish identity, is quite strong. But at the same time, you have many other identities. I was thinking about it today, and you know the film Shrek. There's a scene in that where Shrek says, "Is it ogres are like onions, layers." That's what identity is. Because if you look at Gaelic poetry, if you look at the annals, you have so many competing identities. One of the basic ones is Christian versus non-Christian, pagan, whatever. Another one is related to your work. Is someone a cleric? Is someone a warrior? Is someone a poet? Another one would be regional, Ulster, Munster, Connacht, Leinster, or even, and then you get down to local, then you get down to families, and then you get down, then you can throw in more class-based ones if you want to use that terminology. So you have a series of competing identities in which the idea of being Gaelic Irish was important, but it wasn't always the most important. Because I think the Gaelic Irish had a very strong cultural identity, but not necessarily the idea of one nation. That comes much, much later, as it does in many parts of Europe.
Yeah, I suppose. I have Philip. I don't know if you had any sort of questions laid out like we normally do. I do. If you want me to ask them, we can put a bit of structure to this conversation. No, just so I didn't know, because normally you would sort of have a list of points.
I go through. A full thing there, because I do think it's quite interesting that you guys are going back to the foundation of Ireland, and it is very, very interesting that when we start into, just as Ireland is getting into the complications, and we're starting to get words like Gall Gael starting to appear in the annals of Ulster and stuff, I do find it very, very interesting that the Book of Kells is suddenly constructed, and it literally gives us an image. This is why I started using it in the background and stuff while you guys have been talking away. Because the Book of Kells is a book of what the Irish, the Gael look like. And it is very, very interesting from the get-go. Here is also an image of what a Book of Kells warrior looks like. And I even find this image interesting by itself, because although this is written around the very early 9th century or perhaps the late 8th century, it still gives us this kind of fashion style of what a lot of people assume is perhaps a cattle raider or a kern in his very light clothing and stuff. He's not wearing any riveted mail. He's not wearing any padding. So it's safe to assume perhaps he's wearing, especially since he's got a buckler and a spear, that he is, going out there to cattle raid and attack others and stuff. However, at the same time, it's also very interesting that 100 years later, then, when we look at the cross of scriptures and stuff that we see up in Clonmacnoise, there's the image of what's allegedly two Gall Gael, allegedly Vikings killing Jesus. And on it, they're also wearing very, very similar clothing. If we look at here, I don't know why it keeps highlighting yourself there, Owen. Sorry about that.
But, me today.
Yeah. I keep clicking. Just trying to get myself highlighted. I keep clicking you. But regardless, on the cross of scriptures that we can see up in Clonmacnoise, they're the alleged Gall Gael who are killing Jesus are wearing the same clothing as the men of the Book of Kells and stuff, that quarter-length pants. Now, added on to that, they must have been wearing, riveted mail, so on and so forth. But I do find it interesting that even the term Gall Gael that starts to appear in the Viking Age and is also applied to people who are in the cities, the word, directly translated means foreign Irish. It doesn't, obviously at the same time, we're starting to see the word, the men of Luckland, which is literally meaning the men from Norway or from the Orkneys, around that whole area and stuff, because perhaps maybe it was of the same realm at the time, because these are Norwegians perhaps that have come down and immigrated into Dublin. So we do have the word men of Luckland starting to appear in the literature and stuff, especially even in the Finn cycle and that. We can see the men of Luckland appearing. But beside that, around 840 and stuff, we can see the word foreign Irish pop up. And a lot of people perhaps assume that maybe it means, that these are Norwegians that have settled in Ireland and stuff. And yeah, perhaps that is what it means, but maybe it also means Irish that have kind of detached themselves from society. So I do find it interesting that that word, Gall Gael, does appear. And it's not like it's a word that completely disappears. I know I'm going to say the Anglo version of this word, which is galloglass. That's another word that's kind of, although that's the Anglo version of a word that pops up in the 13th century, which is also foreign as well, kind of the foreign Gael of the mercenaries that come to Ireland around the 13th century. And then also on top of that as well, the quote, quote, Normans, the, what was it called again? The Knights of the Welsh Marshes, that also immigrate from Wales over to Ireland in 1169. It's also interesting as well that around the 15th century, they're also referred to as just blatant as Gaul, foreigner. So it is interesting that, over time, even the word foreign kind of, changes its interpretation and stuff depending on what's going on at the time. Owen was saying there that around the 17th century, you've got the same group of people again being referred to as the Old English, and them, being confused, like, oh, sure, we're English, why aren't you English as well? But maybe perhaps in the 15th century that, especially when you're talking about the likes of Desmond Fitzgerald, how did they really see themselves as being English in the 15th century, especially when, especially in the annals and stuff, when you don't blatantly see the word English being pointed to them. It pops up later on that, that's agreed to as the word Old English.
If you look at texts from the Old English from the 15th, 16th, 17th century, they claim all the time that we are English. They say we're English. There's an academic, Ruth Canning. I think she's in Liverpool University or University of Liverpool, and she's written a lot about the Old English, the Anglo-Irish in the 9 Years' War. And then to them, a very, very strong part of their identity, especially the March Lords, so in the north of Leinster, in sort of Meath, Louth, heading up that way, was the idea that their fathers, their grandfathers, going all the way back to the invasion, had shed their blood to defend the state, the whatever you want to call what they established. Whereas it's a bit different if you go down south. And in the 9 Years' War, these people, Nugent, like O'Shea O'Neill puts in great effort to try and get these to come over, and they won't, because they're not going to. They look down on the Gaelic Irish.
Yeah,
and there's no way in hell that they're going to submit to an alliance led by Hugh O'Neill by Gaelic Irish. But if you go down to Munster, the things are different. So in 1583, the last Earl of Desmond is killed. And then along comes the plantation of Munster. And I think this frightens the hell out of many of the Old English or Anglo-Irish, whatever you want to call them, in Munster. So in the 9 Years' War, you have the Knight of Kerry, who is a Fitzgerald. You have Lord Fitzmaurice. You have the White Knight, who's a Fitzgibbon. And you have several others. And they are actually, and then you have the Sugaun Earl himself. They are probably the strongest supporters of Hugh O'Neill in southern and western Munster. Because the McCarthys were kind of fighting with each other the whole time then. They were missing. But you have this bunch of Geraldines who saw what was happening, and they went strongly for O'Neill. They still saw themselves as English. Possibly they saw themselves as Irish as well. It's a difficult process to fill out.
But the thing I have,
Brendan Bradshaw has done a lot of work on this because there are books in Irish, poetry books, sponsored by various Old English families.
The thing is, as well, is what does the term English mean? And I know it sounds very strange. It's just in the 15th century, there isn't like the nationalism we know today. Because I do find it very, very funny that Galway, for example, have this definition. The way they're using the term, because I remember I was looking at a letter from the 15th century, and it was just the way that they were talking about the term Gaul, Wild Irish, and themselves. Like it was like they were using the term English as civilized. Like they weren't when they were saying, "Oh, we are English," and they were saying it to the king at the time. I think it was Henry V or something. They were writing a letter to, and the usage of the term English, I felt when I was reading it, was very much a case of, well, we're civilized and you're civilized too. And I felt like that's how they were using the word English. And when they were using the term Wild Irish, the people outside of the walls of Galway, I felt, and this is just my feelings now, this isn't hard evidence, I felt it was more like these are the uncivilized people outside the walls. So I feel
the entire justification of the conquest, from Geraldus Cambrensis down to Elizabeth, down to Cromwell, down to the 18th century, is based on the idea that the Irish were savages and the English, whoever they may have been, were coming to civilize them.
Yeah.
The document of the Pope, I forget the name, that gave the Lordship of Ireland, that says you are to improve the Irish Church, educate them. They're getting lost. That gets ignored. But English, to the Old English, whatever, it was something by blood. The English in Ireland, they saw themselves as English, as someone from Yorkshire, as someone from London. So did the English in parts of France. Calais was only lost in the 1550s, I think. And like in the 1540s, if you went to Calais, they saw themselves as English.
But
you had the Pale of Calais as well as the Irish Pale. It was something transmitted by blood, and it involved Christianity, etc. After Reformation, it starts changing. The English start seeing it as being anti-French, anti-Irish, and anti-Catholic. The Protestant English. And that's the picture that gets created from the 16th to the 18th or 19th century of English identity.
Yeah, I think you touched on it there, because in the 100 Years' War in Gascony, I think it is, one of the lords of the area is arguing that to the king at the time can't remember which one, but he's arguing that the French are looking to remove the English language, remove English custom, and those are key points he iterates to sort of, prove that the assistance is needed in the area by the English army, because there's this existential threat, not to the changing of, not just the changing of power, as the 100 Years' War is a dynastic war, and going backwards and forwards was quite commonplace, but the fact that English custom, English language will be lost in the area, therefore eroding its Englishness. And I think that when you touched on there about the Fitzgeralds, it's the argument of they may see themselves as English, but what is English? Because the same way, I suppose, if I was going to put it into a modern context, anyway, as being from Northern Ireland as I am, you have a British population here, but that British population, what they conceive as being British, is alien to those in England who consider themselves British. They have overlaps, but they're not. There's obviously so it's almost like, how do you perceive your identity, and then how does the rest of the identity perceive it, and that obviously comes into play when, like you said before, when you have the new English coming in and they're referring to the old English as Irish dogs because they've dropped, and then dropped English language, they've dropped English dress, and that obviously reinvigorates such statutes as the Statute of Kilkenny in 1366. So obviously the centralization of trying to homogenize Englishness or Irishness, there's attempts on both sides to do this, and try to redefine that, like a capital city makes the judgment of what is, and a centralized government makes what it is to be, that sets the law of what it is to be that thing.
Dan Breen is making a point about modern French, saying it only came about in the 17th or 18th century. Some people actually say it actually comes later, only with the French Revolution. And even today, there are differences between, about the way of saying 80 between, I think in Belgium it's 80, and in France it's 80. There are still differences. After the French Revolution, they imposed this centralized Frenchness, because beforehand, the French language was heavily, the division between Languedoc and Langouis, and then there was other ones, Gascony we mentioned, Picardy, the Flanders. The French would have been very, very, very different in those ones. The way that English today, English in London, is very different from, say, Leeds, say very different from Newcastle, and then cross the borders where it's Scots, it's very different. There are all these big differences that Orthodox history has tended to overlook them in the 19th and 20th centuries. So that people have stamped this idea of France, the France today being the France that always was. It's not. A large part of France, especially in the Mediterranean, only came to France in the 18th century or the 17th century. Dunkirk, for example, was Spanish until the end of the 17th century.
I mean, we can say the same for Irish or Gaeilge. It breaks up into its regional dialects, including the Gaelic Scottish branch in the 14th century. And then when we have later on, we start to have standardized Irish, which a lot of people, I think, is it based on the Munster dialect, which most people are taught today is and with that we've had the loss or the reducing of the Ulster dialect, the Connacht dialect. It's just another attempt to standardize and to homogenize things that are important to national identity, which is language.
Or regional identity, because I know many Irish speakers from South Kerry, and they insist there are big differences between the Irish of South Kerry and the Irish of Dingle, the Irish of Corcadivna. And I'm sure if I went to Cork into Ballyvourney, to Bellnablaw, to that area of West Cork, they would insist that their Irish is different again from Kerry Irish. And then if I went to Waterford, where the other Munster Gaeltacht is in Ring, that would be different again.
Yeah, I think I just got to plug into a guy on TikTok, a mutual of mine, Dwayne Fitzsimmons. He recently did a lot of digging into the Ulster Irish and found that the Strangford area of northeast Ulster had a lot of links to Manx. So it's almost a hybridization of Ulster Irish and Manx in its early sort of writings, not writings, in its early teachings. And obviously, like say, you've got Donegal, which has got its own definition already. Most people who speak Ulster Irish are already aware of the Donegal sort of dialect. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it goes to regional too, but it just shows.
But it's interesting that from the get-go, sorry for butting in there, Micheál, but it's interesting that from the get-go that people from the Kennel Owen at the very, very north of Ireland identified themselves as Gael people of the island of Ireland. And at the same time, if we travel down to the very south, the men of Munster also identified themselves as Gael, Irish people on this island and stuff. However, with the arrival of the Vikings onto the island around the 9th century, then we have this very strange word that does appear, which I'm, bringing up once again, which is called Gael, foreign Irish. And, obviously at the same time, we have the men of Luckland. And it's just interesting that, as you said earlier, Micheál, it's a kind of us and them in the 9th century when these people start to appear. Like even in the literature itself, in the Annals of Ulster, for example, you have the heathens, and even the word heathen itself, people that deny Christ. It kind of like we Gael, we accept Christ. Although, as you said as well, Micheál, when we get into the 13th century and we see the arrival of the Anglo-Normans onto the island, it is a very much a thing of sorry about that, messing around with this again, but it becomes a thing again of this it's the Irish who are uncivilized because they have a very poor understanding of Christianity. And it's interesting that in the 9th century, when the Vikings arrive, that they just outright deny Christ because, if you're going to, I said this like last week on my shorts and stuff, that I did find the word heathen very, very interesting because although it's used as a kind of demonizing word of the heathens over there in Dublin, the heathens in Dublin are staying for the winter. At the same time as well, when you break down the word itself, it means somebody that literally denies Christ. And I do scratch my head and say, so did you go up to them and tell them about Jesus Christ? Oh, why are you applying this word? Why aren't you just turning around and explaining that these are, pagan people and stuff? Why are you using that definition of a person that denies Christ? And it gives this kind of order to them that we are good Christian Irish and they are foreign Irish. They are heathens. They are people that deny Christ. So yeah, it is very, very interesting that, although in the 7th and 8th century, when it's just the Gael people, people of the Kennel Owen that identify as Gael, and then people of Munster at the very bottom of Ireland that identify as Gael, that when we see the coming of the foreigners onto the island, 100% it is, even in the Annals of Ulster itself, it's a very us versus them. People that accept Christ into our lives, people that deny Christ. Why are they using this sort of language? It is very, very interesting that from the get-go, when foreigners start to come into the island, it kind of does have an us versus them attitude. And then later on, when we see the coming of the Normans coming onto the island of Ireland, the reason why, by the way, why I'm using the Lewis chess piece is just to give an indication that the Irish, because the Lewis chess piece was various other chess pieces that were coming into Ireland at the time. The loose chess piece was found between the trade route going from Norway into Ireland, particularly Dublin and stuff, because you can find these loose chess pieces in scattered around Ireland, and you can also find them off in Norway as well, which goes to show that the Irish are continuing to develop at the time. So when you do have the Normans coming onto the island, this being an effigy found up in Kilkenny, that there isn't too much. They're not foreign, clothing wise and stuff. They're not super foreign. There is differences to Irish clothing and stuff, but they're not. I know a lot of people have this image, and you can see it in artwork sometimes, modern artwork and stuff. When the Normans arrive, they're dressed in their traditional Norman clothing of the kite shield, riveted mail. But the Irish are identified as being barbarous. They're kind of wearing woolly clothing and stuff. And this is kind of our modern 2025 interpretation of barbarous Irish, civilized English. But at the time, actually, you would have seen and spotted differences, but they weren't technical, technology-wise, they weren't insanely primitive. There is, obviously, when it comes down to farming and stuff, both farming and when it comes down to warfare, the Normans do have those slight advantages there, but they're not insanely primitive at the same time. But there is an us versus them. So I just wanted to highlight that with the loose chess piece and the effigy up in Kilkenny. And even on top of that, sorry about that one.
No, I agree with what you said, but I think an Irish identity or Gaelic Irish identity goes back to the beginning of Christianity, if not before. And I would take a jump here and say before, because you have the origin legend. Once the Gaelic Irish come into contact with the Bible and biblical culture, they rapidly put themselves into the European history, like the story of Mila Spania. But even before that, you have the idea of the King of Tara, King of Ireland, and you have the kingly sites, Rathcrogan, Dunallina, Cashel, I think, Tara, and Owen Maca, all of which are probably older than Gaelic Irish culture. But they're the kingly sites of Ireland. So I think the people in Ireland in the Iron Age, they had some sort of identity as belonging, as sharing some sort of culture. It was politically divided.
I agree.
But they had this sense of cultural unity and of sharing the island. And then I think it's only natural that there's always someone who wants to do better and wants to become the King of Munster, then the King of Munster and Leinster, then the King of the whole Ireland. So there was a shared idea of Gaeldom. So that it's a bit too early to say Irish, because Irish includes other things, but they saw themselves as unified. So that's why when the North start coming in, they are foreign. They're the Gaul. I think the Gaelic Irish still have to get their minds around different nations coming in, etc., which is why they start using the word foreigner. In a way, it's like you said, it's foreigner, it's outsider, it's just someone different.
Yeah.
1 second, Michal. I just want to fire off these two questions to Owen while he's there, because I think this is more in Owen's field of expertise. I hope you don't mind this one. I just want to have this one answered first one, Dan, because I think this is more fitting into 9 Years' War. Yeah. And then your second question into Cromwell, I'll fire off that then. Why do you think the Old English remains Catholic in general?
In a way, because of Edward IV, Henry VIII's son, and because the English went towards sort of Calvinistic version of Protestantism. So Henry VIII set up his own church in a huff, but it's essentially a Catholic church. There's not many differences. Most lords in Ireland go, okay, fair enough, and they just go on doing what they're doing. Under Edward, it takes a jump. They start, okay, at the end of Henry, they closed the monasteries, which didn't go down well in Ireland. And then under Edward, it goes very Calvinistic, and it starts getting anti-Catholic. And this didn't go down well in Ireland because you start having newcomers at the same time coming. And many of these newcomers, not all, but many are Protestant. And basically the people who are skilled at preaching, the skilled people of the new religion, or the new beliefs, they don't like Ireland because it's poor. They can do much better in England. And they run into trouble in Ireland, and basically they alternate between converting by the book and by the pen and converting by the sword. And in the end, because of the Irish, the dynamics of Irish politics, they lose patience, and they're contemptuous towards Gaelic Irish from the very beginning, and they begin to opt to bringing in to converting people by the sword. And at the same time, the Tudors were not very happy about the independence of whether Irish towns or the Old English lords, even the butlers. They weren't over fond of the independence that these had. And so you have this conjunction of prejudice and inability, not having good people, and then this option to go for the military route of conversion. That's why it failed. I saw his second question about Cromwell. That was true, but it well predates Cromwell. You can see that in the 9 Years' War. The Gaelic Irish, they call the English buttocks, which is churls, or I think nowadays you'd say chavs. And many, for example, Bagnall's father, I think he may have killed someone, he robbed someone in England. He fled to Ireland. Con Bacach O'Neill got him set up. And then sort of he becomes marshal, his son becomes marshal. They're not aristocrats. Hugh O'Neill, whether as O'Neill or as the Earl of Tyrone, is by far his social superior, but Hugh O'Neill is not put on any council. Bagnall, Bingham, they're put on the councils, and they're not, most of them aren't nobles. You have some nobles, the Earls of Essex, etc., come over, but most of the New English are sort of middle-class people who are nouveau riche, and it doesn't go down well with the Gaelic Irish, who are very snobby, shall we say.
Oh, no, I think that ties into.
Oh yeah,
no, I think we're just.
Sorry, the mic on. I had the mic on. I'm sorry, I had the mic off there. Just before I put Michal back on there, I just want to answer this question on that one. What are your perspective on leather armor? Do you think the Irish wore leather armor? Myself, if you were to ask my own personal question, to be quite honest with you, you know, when it comes down to finds or anything, we haven't found any leather armor or any indication for leather armor, to be quite honest with you. It is very debated that perhaps maybe they had leather armor when it came down to cattle raiding. I'd have to look into Dave Swift's recent book, to be quite honest with you. I think he might cover something on leather armor, to be honest with you. But I still haven't looked through his work. And on top of that as well, the Tom Bakule also talks about, it gives an indication to leather armor. No, the counter on that, leather armor and all that kind of stuff, to be quite honest with you, there is no fines to do with leather armor. And on top of that as well, it does feel to be impractical to have leather armor on the battlefield compared to Gambinson padded armor. Padded armor, Gambinson seems to be way more dominant than leather armor on the battlefield. It always comes down to a question of why would you wear leather armor, especially when it's uncomfortable, it chafes against the body and stuff, compared to Gambinson. Gambinson seems to be far more practical, and it's much more easier to work with as well, because it's just a build up. It's just padding of linen. It's just built up linen or built up wool built up on top of itself. And then on top of that, then it prevents the penetration of arrows. And it's absolutely amazing for shock. So if you have anything that's blunt, to smack against somebody, which you may use, there seems to be a large indication for blunt weapons when it comes down to cattle raiding, especially when two its clans don't want to cause a blood feud. They'll go out and use blunt weapons, different kind of clubs and stuff. You do see the indication of that during the 5th and 6th century. Not so much during the Viking Age. During the Viking Age, they seem to get themselves into blood feuds and at times not even give a rat's ass, to be honest with you. And it's there where we see a whole load of indications of Gambitsen and riveted mail. In Ireland, we don't have chainmail, it's riveted mail. So the mail is riveted together piece by piece. And you mostly see it through the, the Clee Airy, the King's Warband, and also obviously the noble classes themselves would have riveted mail and stuff. So, you know, I hope that answers, gives you the answer there. So if you're looking for evidence for leather mail, look to the literature of the Tom by Cooley and look at work to do with Dave Swift. That might give you the answer you're looking for when it comes down to leather armor. Is there anything else in the comment section you guys want to answer before I hand the mic back over to Michal for a wee bit?
No, just interrupt me all the time. It's fine.
What do they call it? What William did to the north of England? The scouring of the north.
Harrowing, was it? Or scouring or something? Harrowing.
I was thinking the scouring of the Shire. I was getting my English history and my talking mixed up. Wolf here said, sorry about the Normans, they genocided the Anglo-Saxon population of England too. They killed 75% of the population of Northern England. I don't know the exact percentage, but I know that... Oh,
the harrowing of the North, that's what you're talking about.
It was brutal.
Yeah, it was complete and utter genocide of the North. And we always forget that one as well. We always assume the Norman invasion of England is over after the Battle of Hastings. And there's actually an entire campaign where actually Diarmid Macmail na Mór, who was the High King of Ireland at the time, actually sponsored his, Godwinson's sons after the Battle of Hastings went to Ireland for aid. And Diarmid Macmail na Mór, although he was facing campaigns of rebellion in his own realm of Munster and Leinster and Dublin, he was also trying to campaign into Meath at the time. However, he did try to do his best that he could to support the Godwinsons in a campaign over to England, in the north of England. And also the King of Denmark as well was also trying to support, the Godwinson sons as well with their campaign in the north of England. But it actually failed because the Normans paid off the mercenaries that were coming over from Ireland and Denmark. They just paid them all off. And those mercenaries then went hiding up in Scotland. So the campaign failed in that degree. Not that they could do much battle-wise. They were trying to, these mercenaries could only really raid and skirmish against the Normans because it was the biggest problem was facing against the Normans on the battlefield because of their cavalry charges. So as I was saying here earlier, most of these Danish and Irish, the Hiberno-Scandinavians, would have actually at the time be dressed more like this rather than, because we always have this image of them in, all this kind of fur and wool and their round shields and stuff. And actually in the 12th century, they would have had kite shields that were more like this, more kind of pointed and stuff. And the Normans, although this is a much more later effigy and stuff, would have been in the riveted, the mail and stuff. The major difference between Norman warfare and Danish and Hiberno-Scandinavian warfare is that cavalry charge. Their horses were way too advanced. And when you have line-on-line fighting and you're coming in like a wrecking ball into the side of that shield wall or spear wall, whatever you want to call it, when you're coming into the side of that, smashing completely through, it's going to give you a massive, huge advantage. And that's what the Normans had. That's why the Normans, both in England and in Ireland, were winning again and again and again. And Ireland and England, as you guys were saying there with the Anglo-Saxons and stuff, or was it Britain, Ireland? They weren't the only victims here. You're also talking about Sicily became a victim to this. The Byzantine Empire would become a massive victim to this. In fact, a big chunk of the Crusades, the Normans in the First Crusade again and again and again had that advantage of the wrecking ball into the side of the formations, which gave them a humongous, massive advantage. Plus, the Normans were exceptionally battle-hardened going into the 11th and 12th century at the time. Anything else?
The Battle of Hastings was, to quote Wellington, a near-run thing.
Yeah.
Despite the Norman cavalry, they barely won Hastings.
Yeah.
It was a tough day at the office.
The Anglo-Saxons knew what they were up to going into the battle. They weren't. We always assume the Anglo-Saxons and the Gaelic are ignorant to Norman warfare. They knew what Norman warfare had looked like. Not so much, and even on top of that, the Anglo-Saxons knew what they were up to, but you can tell by their formation, they formed up on top of a hill, and they made sure their flanks were blocked between the trees. The only thing that wrecked up the poor Anglo-Saxons was the ill discipline of the peasants when they went chasing the Normans down the hill, and it actually opened up a complete opportunity for the Norman cavalry charges to go in and smash up the ranks. If for the frustration of them, and you can imagine Godwinson up on the top of the hill watching his peasants racing down to fight the Normans, if those bloody peasants had stayed in line, they actually probably would have won the battle because there would have been no opportunity grabs.
Or if Harold had waited for more of it, because he went marching down from Yorkshire really, really, really quickly to Hastings. And if he'd gone a bit slower, he would have had a stronger army. The battle could have been a different one.
Oh, massively. Yeah, they weren't ignorant, and it was the same thing with the Gaels as well. But God, to my frustration, it's Rory O'Connor's constant actions.
One point that I find very interesting in the difference between the Norman conquest of England, which was relatively quick, and the Norman conquest, the Norman Anglo-Norman, Welsh-Norman invasion of Ireland, was that England was very, very centralized. So Harold is killed. William marches on London. There's a lot of political maneuverings. And within a few months, William is made King of England. In Ireland, they won a lot of victories. They get the lordship, but they never achieve a decisive military battle, an equivalent of Hastings, because there are too many political centers in Ireland. They defeat the cities of Waterford, Wexford, and Dublin. They defeat Rory O'Connor, but they don't conquer most of the country or a large part of the country because there's too much resistance. There's too many different points to conquer. There's not one. I think when they went in, they had a belief that if they took Dublin, that was it. When it wasn't, it was just one point in a very long story.
I definitely would agree with you there. I think, but also on top of that as well, it's the frustration of like, what the hell is Rory O'Connor doing? There's a lot of instances where you can sort of explain it because of his interpretation, plus how the medieval period worked at the time. But then there's other times, like the Siege of Limerick, for example, in 1172. I covered this, sorry, not 1172, 1175. I covered this over on my Patreon, and like, what the hell is Rory O'Connor doing, switching sides and supporting the Treaty of Windsor against the O'Briens? Because it seems to me, if the O'Briens had the support of the O'Connors going into the Siege of Limerick of 1175, sorry, not 1175, I keep getting that one wrong, I mean 1176, and that's very, very important because there's actually a good few sieges of Limerick in that era. I am talking about the Siege of Limerick of 1176. If Rory O'Connor had stayed on the side of the O'Briens going into the siege of Limerick, there's a good chance that they would have won that battle. And I think this is very fitting going into our next part of the conversation as we go into the 13th century, because of the fact that, we're talking and talking and talking about this identity of, we're Gael and they're the foreigners. Then why the hell in the 13th century, again and again and again, even going into Brian O'Neill's revolt around, 1260, why the hell is he fighting most of his family? If we have an identity of we are the Gael and they're the foreigners, why are we fighting amongst each other? Why is this happening over and over again?
I think because you have a unified cultural identity, but not a unified political one. And you have a very dynamic political system which encourages inter-family fighting. It's the same around the same time as the Battle of Down, you have the Battle of Callan in Kerry. But I know Paul McCotter says that has one aspect that's Norman against Gaelic Irish, but it's also a big feud within the McCartys. So the Gaelic Irish fractured a lot, and I think they had this idea that they could, like, the Norse had come in and been absorbed, so the same would happen with the English. I think they didn't realize the difference that they were facing this time. It was like they were fighting probably the most centralized state in Europe, which was forming empires.
Yeah.
Which was something new to them.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point, because at the time, and a lot of people do forget that literally modern historians are referring to them as a part of the empire, the Anjou Empire, led by Henry II. Now, Henry II never referred to himself as emperor, or never pushed his realm to be referred to as an empire, and most likely because of the fear that he had because of his mother, which was Empress Matilda, who was rejected by the English people, because we literally just came out of a second usurpation, where Henry II had debatably usurped King Stephen, because King Stephen at the same time he did adopt Henry II into his realm and stuff, so it's not like it's a complete usurpation. However, at the same time, Henry II's mother, Empress Matilda, was rejected from her queenship of England. I'm tripping over now. Because of the fact that she referred to herself as a centralized empress who wanted to be worshipped. And at the time, England was still mostly dominated by the Anglo-Saxons, who liked their local community. They liked that feel of going into their local community. And here you had the likes of, King Stephen, Empress Matilda, and now Henry II, who, kind of represent these centralized ideas. So even in England, it is quite interesting that, it's this back and forth of centralization versus non-centralization. But you're perfectly right at the same time, especially compared to France, or even more so again, especially against the Holy Roman Empire. England was, the best representation of what is centralization, especially when they got some of their top nobles and smashed it in 1172, when you had the arrival of the likes of the Marshals, the Butlers, the Anglo-Normans starting to smash into Ireland with a much more centralized idea, even more so than the Knights of the Welsh Marches, who smashed in around 1169 with Strongbow and stuff. So yeah, I do fully agree with you that there was more of a centralized idea. And I think, although Henry III does get criticized to hell all the time, he did continue this centralized idea over to the likes of the Fitzgeralds and various other characters who were pushing and expanding their land in Ireland, that they were the King's Knights in Ireland. Like, you do see that being referenced and used between letters and stuff. So it does give a more centralized idea to them at the time. Complicated subject. especially when the Annals of Ulster and stuff still slightly identifies these kind of King's Knights in Ireland as foreign compared to the English who come in, where they're just referred to as was it the Saxons and all that kind of language. There is slight differences in the language at the time. Like maybe overall, you're still kind of right that overall they're still referred to as English compared to this whole idea of, well, you know, the English in Ireland are referred to as foreign and the English in England are referred to as English. You know, maybe there is a level of differences, or, you know, it's a complicated subject. Like,
something that is interesting is that the Gaelic Irish, the elites, nobility, fought a lot among themselves, but so did the Normans.
Yeah.
Like, the course, like, go to any Norman castle in Ireland, and it's always built by somebody, then it passes to somebody else, then there's a war between two Norman knights for Carlingford, Trim, the Earldom of Ulster. There's so many inter-Norman fights, inter-Anglo-Norman, Anglo-Norman fights in Ireland, and you have the same in England. You had John fighting his barons, and they invited in the French, and Marshall kind of intervenes at the last moment. But somehow the Normans managed to preserve the state that William won based in London. Sort of, and this state ruled over England, it ruled over Wales, parts of Ireland, and large parts of France. And like, if you look at the English, the Orthodox English history portrays everything, you know, okay, you have the War of the Roses and the anarchy, but it's more than, it's non-stop fighting. It's as bad as Ireland. I don't understand a lot of it because it's always Lord such and such fighting such and such.
But you have that
die in the War of the Roses.
But at the same time, that's what makes the 13th century so juicy as well, is because you have all these Baron Wars. Like the English Baron Wars are quite literally referred to as the Baron Wars, and there's two of them that last bloody forever. The first one, which is, you know, the first Baron War fought against King John, and the second Baron War fought against Simon de Montfort and Henry III and Edward I. Both, you know, pretty much encapsulates the era of the 13th century, you know, throughout all of Europe, because you can see it, you know, in England, you can see it in France, you can see it in the Holy Roman Empire. Not so much, well, actually, you can actually see it in the Iberian Peninsula, where they're supposed to be, you know, unified and fighting against the Muslim Moors and stuff, and that's not the case all the time. You can see that with El Cid. El Cid, half the time he's meant to be, you know, against the Muslims, and yet he's mercenarying himself off to them, fighting against his own Christians. And even when he said
in Iberia, the Enrique, the first king, his mother, I think, was the Queen of Galicia, and he gets Portugal to split off. Portugal becomes and they spend as much time fighting the Spanish or the Castilians, really, than they do fighting the Moors.
Yeah.
Sort of. I think we lost Mihal.
Yeah, Mihal kind of dropped off the ship there. It kind of got a bit shaky for him, and then he fell completely off. I think he tried to get back in, but I think he's having internet connection problems. I'll shoot him a comment there while you fill in some of the questions and stuff. But I just want to quickly answer this one as well off Dan. Is it oversimplified to say the Normans are descended from the Vikings? I would even take a step back again when it comes down to that question of the Normans, because we actually, even the usage of the word Normans, especially going into the oh, he's back on the ship again. Yeah, I think his internet connection is acting up a wee bit, but we'll leave him for a few seconds there to do his own thing as I answer this question. But I even think, to be honest with you, Owen, when it comes down to this question here, I think it's even oversimplified, because we actually have that book that came out was it last year, the English invasion of Ireland of 1169, which was made up on the University of Liverpool. I can't remember I think it's Diarmid who had written that book, but regardless, I can't remember specifically who had written it. But he brings out a very good point that, like, even the term Norman, when it comes down to the invasion of 1169, is an oversimplified modern term, which it is, to be quite honest with you, because at the time, the first wave is referred to as the Knights of the Welsh Marches. And it is like even their descendancy, although the main descendancy is Norman. And you can see that, was it? Mihal's friend over in TikTok brought out a very good idea that very good point, I mean, that even when we go into 1220 or even 1240, you still have, what was it called? Knights living in Ireland who go over to Normandy to visit their cousins and relatives and stuff. So there's still this strong Norman identity in Ireland throughout the entire 13th century. But at the same time, you still have people that are related to people in Brittany, Frisia, and various other parts of France. Oh, and Anjou as well. So at the same time, even the term Norman is oversimplified. Like we use it in a very modern context. Because at the time, you know, as I just said there, they were referred to as the Knights of the Welsh Marches. And then you have the second wave that comes in 1172, where they're referred to as, you know, English Knight, well, Saxon Knights from the Irish interpretation. So, yeah, I do think we kind of oversimplify everything, to be quite honest with you, but just so we can have a conversation, because, God, trying to use all these terms.
Even going back to 1066, it was not a Norman army. It was the army of William Duke of Normandy, which included large amounts of Bretons and other knights, and Flemings, etc. It included a large amount of people. And then by 1172, how many had married with Welsh? How many had married with English? It was getting mixed up. William Marshall, the greatest of all knights, his wife's granddad was Dermot MacMurrough.
Yeah.
Like his kids could have played for Ireland.
Yeah. It's the same with Strongbow. This is actually also funny as well, is when you have the first wave coming in 1169 with Strongbow and stuff. The O'Briens are actually on the side of Strongbow because they're actually related together. It was Strongbow needed support when it went into his Usherga campaign. He was going into Usherga, modern day Kilkenny, and he used his old Marriage Alliance card with the O'Briens, and the O'Briens didn't even hesitate. They came down and supported Strongbow. Now, this is the first wave. This is before we had any massive English invasion into Ireland in 1172. So maybe Strongbow wasn't so for, and it is very debated, you know, what was going on fully in his head at the time of the O'Briens. But the O'Briens didn't even hesitate to go and support Strongbow and the MacMurroughs, like especially in that whole 1170 and stuff. It was still the Normans were still mercenaries to the MacMurroughs going into Kilkenny. So the O'Briens, I don't think the O'Briens hesitated whatsoever. It's not until we get into 1172 that the O'Briens do no switcheroo and go against the second wave coming into Ireland. They kind of, as we refer to from a modern interpretation, the Anglo-Norman invasion of Ireland, that we see that kind of switch of the Normans. Anything you want to elaborate there, Michal?
No, I don't know what I missed in the initial question for the Normans being of Viking descent. I will just say that the Normans, what they did in Ireland wasn't any different to what they did when these Viking settlers were given land and titles in France. There were already nobility there, French nobility there, who would be absorbed into this new duchy. So they would already exist on multiple levels. French nobility, we'll use the term French again, it can be used as an over-encompassing terminology for that area. So that again, and I think I came in just as you said that there were Frisians, there were Bretons, etc. And a lot of these, the several generations go back from when these Vikings, as that question sort of asks, that they now own lands outside of Normandy. These families have married into families, vice versa. It's a patchwork. It's not this neat line that you see on the maps where we draw these duchies and these sort of boundaries. It's a patchwork of land holdings, purposely done in such a way that as much as your land isn't held together, so you don't have a centralized area to operate from in rebellion. And this can be seen in England as well. So, yeah, it's a mix of lots of people and lots of backgrounds.
This is an interesting one as well. Shouldn't we use we shouldn't use Norman as that. We should call them what the English or Irish manuscripts do, which is French, which I do find interesting because at the time, you do have House Anjou that has recently taken over from House of Normandy. So, at this time, it is very debatable. Should you refer to them as French? Now, what do you think on that one, guys? Do you think they should be referred to as French?
I think I was going to throw in a similar grenade. At the time of the Crusades, didn't
Saracens
call the Crusaders Franks?
Yeah, they did. Because you even have Hiberno-Scandinavian. When I was doing my research into the First Crusade about the Hiberno-Scandinavians that attached themselves onto House of Normandy, then marched off to what was it called? Jerusalem and stuff. They're constantly referred to as the Franks. I couldn't find it's grand at the very start. You can see them settling in and stuff, but once they go off to Jerusalem and stuff, good luck trying to find them because they're just mass referred to as Franks constantly. Even referred to between them as a whole. They're just the Crusaders and stuff. So trying to find your group of Hiberno-Scandinavians that went off as mercenaries to the First Crusade, you won't be able to find them again until they pop up in the church just behind the forecourts. I cannot tell what the hell they did over in Jerusalem and stuff, to be quite honest with you. All I know is that you have a group of Hiberno-Scandinavians that are hinted, because they use the word pilgrimage, are hinted because the Irish are just like it's the Norwegians as well. They don't tell the difference between a crusade and a pilgrimage. So they just brand all of it as a pilgrimage. So what they say is that so-and-so went on a pilgrimage, and you're looking at the sources and stuff, and you're like, wait, there's a crusade happening at the same time. How can he go to a pilgrimage to Jerusalem? Why did he decide to go to Jerusalem? And you're suddenly like putting two together and going, hey, wait, he's just gone off on a crusade. That's not a nice peaceful pilgrimage at all. And then what you have afterwards is the sudden appearance of archaeological finds of graves in Dublin, just behind the forecourts of Crusaders from the First Crusade. So it gives us an indication that
St. Nicholas Church.
That's the one. The one that recently went on fire. So it gives us an indication that we do have Hiberno-Scandinavians that went off on pilgrimage in 1080 to Jerusalem, and then were able to return and were buried in, as you said there, St. Nicholas, or unless this is a bunch of English people that just decided they wanted to be buried in Dublin. I don't know.
We also, if you're going to use the term to encompass the Normans, it's French. I mean, we got to remember the statutes of Kilkenny were written in French as well, to ask them to speak English.
Yeah. I've had because I covered a video years back on the statutes of Kilkenny, and I always get people joking about that, as well. All right, there's a lot of questions now in the comment section.
There was one question, someone saying down below that means there's nothing. Irish means nothing, or there's no such thing as Irish, which I was going to disagree with. There was an Irishness, but it's better to call it a Gaelic Irish identity. And changed. It incorporated eventually the Norse, and from the 17th century onwards, it began to, or the 16th century onwards, it began to incorporate the Old English. So there is something, a sense of Irishness. Irishness has a meaning that dates back to Christianization, if not before.
Oh yeah.
Well, I went touch on that before. That's what we were sort of before we started answering questions, is that I agree with your statement that the identity, we'll say proto-Irishness, that's what I've been putting proto in front of everything, that's before the main. There's the we've had this idea of unity in so many aspects. We construct this genealogical link through our Milesian genealogy as well. The Labor, Gavala, Aaron stitches the Enil, the Oanoctor, the Dalkash into one mythic family tree. So we've always had this self-identity, self-awareness of a shared culture, shared blood, shared, whatever it is. It's just when it came to politics, we just couldn't agree on who should be running the show. Whereas obviously in England, they kind of got round to they were a bit more organized and got round the table quicker to see who would be running it. The guy with the biggest stick. We just had a lot more sticks. But what I will say as well is that it's part of the reason I believe that our shared cultural and genetic and all this sort of idea was why we were so hard to conquer as a single entity, and why we assimilated in groups into us rather than. So the Normans didn't assimilate into Anglo-Saxon culture. They invaded, took over, redefined it as they saw fit. And they did that in England, but they didn't do it in Ireland. The Norse took over Northern England, implanted Danelaw, redefined the area as they saw fit. They became the Hiberno Norse, or Hiberno the Gaul Gael. So again, I think it's because when you are taking over an area and you're dominating, the first thing you want to do is to we see it with the statutes of Kilkenny, we see it with a lot of other acts later on, is that you try to eradicate the current us and them. You try to make the new populace who you take over as part of us. Whereas I think they found that very hard to do in Ireland, because we had such a we didn't have a structured government, we had a structured awareness of self, of us, probably more than, not like overly more, but it was written down. It was more in our mythology. It was harder to take over, and I think that sort of plays into it a wee bit. Not maybe more than I'm over egging it a bit, but I do think it definitely played a part into how they didn't take over, they assimilated, and then eventually took over in the later on.
You do bring up a very good point there. Sorry for putting in there, Owen. But Michal, you bring up a very good point. And somebody in my Patreon said it a few months back as well. She kind of wanted me to investigate, and I still forgot to go around to do it. Well, mostly because I found the question quite difficult to answer myself, to be quite honest with you. And that is, why is it that you have Scandinavians that were immigrating into Britain? They're immigrating into Ireland, and when they come into Ireland around 840, although there's a period of us versus them, by the time you get up to the 10th century, as I was pointing out there with the effigies and stuff, you can see that with the cross up in Clonmacnoise, and you can see that with the Book of Kells, how similar already the Gaul Gael, the foreign Irish, and even that term foreign Irish, compared to in England, where it is, the Danes versus the Anglo-Saxons throughout, even coming up to the 11th century, where the Anglo-Saxons go up and just genocide the Danes out of it. Although for example, the Ionale Confederation, the confederation made between the likes of the Kenloan and the Calcolan and stuff, the coming together of these Tuna in the middle and north of Ireland to go over and sack Dublin. They don't go in there and genocide Dublin. They keep the Vikings there. There is times when they do kick out the main dynasty, the Emirs, out of it when they're being very troublesome. But there's still, especially when it comes down to the time of Brodar Emer and stuff, he's going to the assemblies in Ireland and stuff. They're not completely alien. They're still using terms like foreign Irish and stuff, but they're not as alien as you can see in England, as you pointed out there with Danelaw and stuff. In England, they're completely divided, but in Ireland, it seems to be very kind of grey. It's true that the Vikings don't become a fully assimilated into Irish society until around the 12th century, when you have the likes of Murtagh Ibrahim and stuff, who finally brings the Vikings into, Gael society. But at the same time, it's not completely. It is very, very great compared to what was it called, the Anglo-Saxons in England. But then later on, when you have the Normans that come in, the Normans very quickly get on that kind of English. It takes, I don't know, 200 years in total, where finally these Normans are fully digested in, compared to Ireland, where it never seems to happen. They literally go from this Norman identity to then, when you go up to the likes of the 14th, 15th, and 16th century, as we can see with the statutes of Kilkenny, you can see what, the likes of Sean Duffy's books and stuff, where he identifies them then as kind of the Anglo-Irish people who lived between the Gael world and the English world. And then when you get up to the likes of the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, being referred to as the Old English. And it's not until we get up to the likes of the Cromwell Wars and stuff that, you've got this kind of Irish-English identity and stuff. So it is very, very strange how one group is able to assimilate in, almost completely. And then you have the Normans who come in, who are constantly in this kind of weird world in between, like.
Yeah. I wanted to I agree more or less what you said. I wanted to return to what Michal said about history, because Ireland's geographic position gave it a certain advantage. From the emergence of the Gaelic people until the north, there was no invasion as such in Ireland. So the Gaelic Irish people were able to develop. They Christianized themselves, basically. Or I know that St. Patrick came from outside, but Ireland became Christian peacefully. It had its own history, its own mythology, going back a lot, very far. Whereas if you look at the island of Britain, England, there was nothing really left of the culture of the pre-Roman Britons, apart from parts of Wales and possibly parts of Scotland. What you had is some sort of massive, I know they don't like using the word invasion, but you had a big immigration of people in who brought a new culture, a new language, etc. Then the Norse came in, and the Norse almost conquered. They did rule a lot of England for a long time, and there are lots of movements so their history, their mythology, especially the English, is much younger, much newer, much more malleable than the Gaelic Irish. But one of the things that the Normans start doing very soon after coming to Ireland, they start differentiating themselves with the Gaelic Irish, start essentially saying that the Gaelic Irish are barbarians. This goes in waves, but it lasts until Cromwell, if not later. So there was this differentiation. That's why that's one of the reasons why, although the descendants of the Normans learned how to speak Irish, were very integrated, many of them still saw themselves as English. They still differentiated themselves.
Yeah, and it is interesting because like Matt Potter, sorry for butchering your name, sorry, Matt Potter brings up a very good point as well about the intermarriage always happened to create alliances and legalize the Norman rule. The Normans were mercenaries invited into the north of France. Not for sure about the North France. Were given lands to pay them off. Oh yeah, I know what you mean. The Vikings were invited in. Yeah, very good point there off Matt as well. How the Normans, because like even from their roots down, when they go from Scandinavia over to the north of France, how they're able to digest into French culture and stuff, and at the same time slightly keep some of their Viking foundations and stuff to give them an identity different to Paris and the Anjou territories at the time. So that is quite unique to them. But at the same time, they are mixing between the Franks and themselves, and then when they go off to England, continue that mixing and everything going on for sure. Is there any other questions and stuff you guys want to answer? Because we do have a few of them, and we just have the half an hour left.
But let me just see what it was. Someone was asking about the Aaron and the Christney.
It's there, Ulysses 31. It's in the middle of the screen.
Go on anyway, and I'll find
it. Yeah. So I'm guessing it's how do they sort of play into the Gaelic identity? Because I know in the Book of Leinster, in the genealogical tracts, the Cruithne are treated as like a separate race. But any historian will tell you that we don't actually see them in genealogical finds, in genealogical tracts, and what's the word I'm looking? Archaeological finds. We don't see them as being separate in any way to their neighbouring Gaels. Now, obviously, I know probably Owen shares a similar idea as me. Is that in our traditional sort of narrative, Gaelic culture and identity is brought to us by the Gaels invaded Ireland. I am of the opinion that the Gaelic culture and identity was formed in Ireland and partly in Argyll, Western Scotland, and it was created in Ireland from these multiple migrations going right back to the Neolithic era. So all these migrations formed the Gaelic identity, and that became the Irish identity today. So I don't believe in this Gaelic invasion that sort of took over Ireland. So we'll use that as my sort of point for what I'm about to say, is that as this Gaelic identity happened, we had Iron Age groups that still existed in Ireland, like the Cruithne, who may be related in some way to Brythonic groups like the Picts. Living in Ireland, we had groups probably from mainland Britain as well, other parts of mainland Britain living in Ireland, groups from Europe living in Ireland. And what happened is these all came together and formed the Gaelic identity. And you will have groups that were demoted for whatever reason, political at the time, to being seen as outside of that. But they certainly saw themselves later on, the Cruithne especially, certainly saw themselves as Gaelic. In fact, they went to great lengths later on in the 8th and 9th century to really egg up their links to being Gaels. They tried to claim Nail descent. They took on the tribal markings of the Ullid, trying to say that they were the true Ullid, taking that from another group called the Dal Fiatach, who were included in the Gaelic identity and genealogical tracts as being pure Gaels, who had claimed the title of being the true Ullid before anyone else. And they the Cruithne tried to take that Ullid title. Now the Cruithne are a group that incorporates the Dalriada, and are the group that went back to Scotland, part of that invasion. That's another thing. So you can see how it doesn't matter really where you came into the migration of Ireland. You are being it's politics that whether you are then assimilated into the inner circle of being Gael or not. Most groups had multiple origin points. So with the Christie, it's even though their blood is Brythonic in some way, they made great lengths to be seen as Irish, to be incorporated as Irish, and they were then assimilated later on, and that political maneuvering and propaganda, self-propaganda that they released allowed them to be incorporated into the wider Enial sphere. So it just goes again to show another group sort of being incorporated, but these are Iron Age groups now. These aren't later on. So
very good points there. Just unless Owen O'Neill wants to expand on.
There was a question there a point by Matt. I want to just respond to quickly. They had adopted Gaelic customs intermarried into the clan system.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on that one as well. I'll leave you expand on that one first, Owen, and then I'll do my spiel as well.
Okay. And this is where I differ with Matt. And after generations couldn't be distinguished from the native Irish. I disagree with that. They could, and they did. If you go anywhere in the world, people go to any town anywhere in the world, people there have skills at identifying who's from there, who's from somewhere else. You go to Cork, and the people's there, oh no, this guy's not from Cork, he's from Bandon. Or they can tell who's from Bandon, who's from East Cork, who's from West Cork. So if you jump back to the 16th century, the 15th century, although you may have an Earl of Desmond who speaks Irish, everybody knew he regarded himself as English. Everybody knew where he came from. In part because the Old English, the Anglo-Irish, they followed largely primogeniture. They didn't follow the more chaotic Irish system of inheritance. And people had the skills to be able to differentiate where people came from. Shane O'Neill's grandmother and possibly mother were from the Fitzgeralds of Kildare, but he still regarded himself as Gaelic Irish. But the Earl of Kildare regarded himself as English, possibly English Irish. People knew how to do that. Nowadays, looking back 400 or 500 years into the past, we find that different. An American, say, coming into Kerry, might not be able to differentiate who's from South Kerry, who's from North Kerry, or who's from Kerry, who's from Cork, who's from Limerick. But the locals can. And that's a skill you'll find anywhere in the world. If I went to Boston, I could get into trouble by mixing South Boston from North Boston or West Boston. It's a skill people have.
I definitely agree with you on that one. And also, especially for us down south as well, because there is a massive difference you could definitely tell a massive difference between Cork and Kerry when you go through the border for us. But maybe for foreigners, blow-ins, they wouldn't be able to distinguish the difference between us and them. But we can.
Same with Ulster. We're far superior, so.
Just to, if you guys are criticizing mics and all that kind of stuff, just advise us as well what kind of stuff to buy as well, because we're always trying to, obviously with the money and Patreon and stuff you guys are sending out to us, definitely advise us what kind of software and stuff to get a hold of, because we actually specialize in history. When it comes down to technology, Jesus, we're absolutely terrible. I'm literally just making it up as I go along. So be patient when it comes down to that kind of stuff. And also on top of that as well, my name, obviously, this isn't popping up all the time. If I highlight this here, it's funny, when we first got a hold of this, all of our names would pop up perfectly. But my name is Philip Ojeda, and I'm over in Irish Medieval History. Just below me is Dr. Owen O'Neill, and then below him again is Micheál from Clans and Dynasties. So if you're looking to identify who we are, there's our names below. So if you're just wondering if one of us are having technical problems or anything like that, definitely point out who it is and stuff, so we can make those changes and stuff in the future. And just bear with us, because we don't specialize in any of this technology whatsoever. We're a bunch of history nerds that spend endless hours reading books, not touching computers, to be quite honest with you. So please be patient when it comes down to that. Just going back over to this one, just so I can expand on that one for the next 40 minutes or so, which will lead us up to the next topic for next week, which is the Anglo-Irish. I do find this interesting because about 4 years ago, myself and Michal were talking to Rue Butler, and he made a very good point about the likes of the Gilpatrick, the Fitzpatrick and stuff, how they were solid evidence. And it's not just the Fitzpatricks, for example. You can see the same thing with the O'Briens and the O'Connors, how we have this interpretation. If I go over to the seal of the O'Connors here, and now it's decided it's going to hire Michal while he's typing away. Click, 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 click. It's the, what was it called? What we have here is the seal of O'Connor. And that's very interesting because it's gone from a very kind of Norman interpretation, a very kind of European, a kind of, how we say, kind of maybe Gael Euro kind of style. I'm not really sure how to put it, but it's definitely a European style, not a default Gael style that we're used to. And this letter was sent from the O'Connors to the Plantagenets, King Henry III at the time, and it had this seal on it to kind of represent the O'Connors. And it's not the typical kind of tree or anything that you'd see associated with the O'Connors. It's very European, which is very, very interesting that we get this kind of idea from a modern interpretation that the Normans came in and that the Normans became more Irish than the Irish themselves, when in reality it seems to be very blurred, that even the O'Connors themselves, the kings of Ireland, well, the man with the biggest stick in Ireland, even they themselves are being influenced by the Normans, or at least European ideas are going into the great halls of the O'Connors and even influencing them. So although we have this interpretation of the Normans coming in and becoming more Irish than the Irish themselves by the 14th century, it's also true the other way around, that we do have the likes of the O'Briens, the O'Neills, and the O'Connors taking on these kind of European and English identities at the time. And even when we look at the grave slabs at the time as well, if we were to look at this one in particular, you can see that mixture there. With this one up in the top, you get this effigy idea, which falls in line again, as I said earlier on, with the effigies that we see up in Cashel, to do with the likes of the butlers and stuff, that we even have effigies with the Irish themselves, where we can see that influence, that kind of European, English, French influence. But at the same time, if we look at the gallows glass at the center here, and even the clothing that O'Connor has is very long tunic that fits in more in line with the Gaelic style of clothing. And then in the middle, we have the, the gallows glass, who immigrated in from the Hebrides, which was controlled by the Norwegians, and from Scottish territory as well, you know, the likes of the McSweeneys that were from Scotland itself. And they themselves here are wearing kind of Norwegian Scottish clothing. The helmet, as you can see here, is very unique. You would never see this in Europe. And also the riveted mail style that they have with the lena at the bottom tipping out there. You can kind of see indication of the lena, and also you can see the gammonsen just at the top there as well. So it's more of a Norwegian Scottish influence coming in, affecting the effigy that we can see here. And you can still see the base foundation of their Gael clothing as well that O'Connor is wearing. So although we have this interpretation of the Normans coming in and becoming more Irish than the Irish themselves, the world is still circulating and changing. It's not stale. We can see influences coming in from Europe, but at the same time, those influences coming in as well. So I do think people need to take note of that as well, that it's not a clean cut situation of the Gaels staying the same and wearing the same clothing for 1,000 years, and then the Normans coming in and adopting that clothing as well. Then in fact we have circulation coming in here, that we have European ideas coming in at the same time. We have this kind of Scottish Norwegian influences coming in, and then at the same time as well, the Gael are also having influences into the Highlands, and then that kind of blurring into the lowlands and into the border Reiver territories between Scotland and England at the same time as well. We can see how the at the time when we go into the the 14th to 15th century, how Gaelic society has blurred into the southeast side of Ireland to influence the Normans that had come in and mix them upon them. What was it called? Michal, I see that you want to kind of elaborate on that one. You seem to be pondering on something there.
Oh no, I wanted to add that like when you said the Fitzpatricks and how it goes both ways, that there is a document in the 16th century around I think I don't know if it's the Desmond Rebellion or the Tudor Conquest, I can't remember. But anyway, it's a guy with a very obvious Irish name, who has written to English courts to justify and state how he is not of Irish descent, because of the things that are coming in that are sort of anti-Irish and with land holdings and stuff. And he goes to great lengths to sort of state how he is not of Irish descent, he is of English descent, and it's a full document basically of him just proving his case in court, that he's not an Irishman, even though he has this Irish, first name and surname. Whether it's I don't know the translation if it's an English name that's been Gaelicized, but it's just interesting that you would bring that up, and that how identity, we've got Irishmen that are proving, trying to assimilate into English culture, whether that's becoming the McGillapatricks to the Fitzpatricks. We know how the O'Briens sort of integrate themselves into the English political system. And then we obviously have these sort of people in the middle who are getting caught up in all of this, who are then trying to justify their position for whatever reason, whether it be political or for inheritance or whatever. So it just shows, like you said there, just reiterates how blurry the lines can be.
For sure.
To add that in.
Yeah, just heading back over to the comments section as well. The Normans weren't French; they were Viking. The comments tonight are absolutely magnificent. They're very, very good. But I would add a note: just if you do make a statement, it's grand to make statements on the thing and everything, but if you could do us a favor and just elaborate on a wee bit more, just making blunt statements is kind of like, okay, and what do you mean by the Normans weren't French, they were Viking? What do you mean by that? So definitely, if you make a statement, definitely elaborate on it. And it would be even better still if you add some books in there. So even if I haven't read the book, I can go and investigate, or I could probably get a good idea of what you're trying to say because of that professor who's now supporting up your argument and stuff.
I want to go into Seamus's one. Seamus O'Blian.
I have to find him. Are you talking about this one here? Seamus is very good.
Are you keeping Seamus? Not in just. Oh, did I lose? No, I thought I lost signal there, and then I just suddenly appeared before. So again, I'm going to keep it not so much with the cultural side, but in the identity earmark of this conversation. When you have the Kings of Moray, who are literally justifying their claim to being kings through the fact that they have Irish descent, that they come from an Irish nobility or Gaelic nobility. And this goes back, obviously, to the Dalriada, the invasion of Scotland, that claim, so that their whole justification for their rule of Moray relies on, and future kings would use it too, is their Irish descent, and that gives them the claim and the right to rule Moray. We also have Robert Bruce, who writes back to kings in Ireland, claiming that Scotland is Little Ireland. I can't remember the Latin term for it, but it refers to Ireland as, the Big Ireland, and Scotland is Little Ireland, and this ancient connection, and how Ireland is the fatherland for us Scots. And I mean, it's overemphasized, and it's romanticized because it's a political statement, it's a political gesture. But it does harken back to the fact that Scottish kings, all Scottish kings, in varying degrees, would link this tie to being of the Dalriada, therefore being of Ireland, to be legitimized as a ruler in Scotland. So it really shows that, again, this is just the identity marker for the composition of this video. But you can see that the Gaels of the Gaelic-speaking people, kings, and the eventual Norman kings are using this tie to their Irishness, or their claim to Irishness, for their right to rule Scotland. So it's not really overplayed. It's played. It's a political piece played in medieval Scotland. So there is obviously a very close connection between the two countries.
Can I add to that? In that, until the end of the 17th century, many Gaelic Irish would have regarded Gaelic Scotland as being part of their same culture, the Gaeltacht. Elizabeth had a Gaelic problem. James of Scotland had a Gaelic problem. They solved it in different ways. The kings of Scotland were quite adept, especially in the early modern period, at starting to incorporate Gaelic lords. The most obvious one is Campbell, who becomes Duke of Argyll eventually. The sad thing is that although James was good at doing that with Campbell and others in Scotland, and I know he did some bad stuff with some Scots Gaelic people, he failed completely in Ireland because he left Ireland up to the English in Ireland. And then with that, and with the Reformation, it brings a split in this Gaeltacht. It splits into Scotland and Ireland, a split which then gets exacerbated with the rise of nationalism, which kind of instead of a Gaeltacht, you have a nation. It's complicated, but that's what it's like.
Yeah, I want to quickly just add as well, Campbell's a great example of these these changes in. You have a family who's been, I think, kind of been proven to be genetically from a Brythonic stock, so native to the Argyll area before the arrival of the Gaels, who adopt a Gaelic surname, who then become huge players in the Norman kingdom of the Bruces, and then eventually become the most powerful family in Scotland under the British system. They are a perfect example of this constant moving and changings, and how complicated the whole discussion is. So it's just funny you say the Campbells and how they are a perfect embodiment of this movement.
And as far as I know, the Campbells claimed descent from Dermot of Divna, who is Dermot of Augustronia, who's from South Kerry.
Through maternal lines.
Yeah, so the Campbells are really Kerry men.
Yeah, well, yeah, I believe their maternal, they believe their paternal line married into the heiress of Odivna, but it's yes, the link is there as well with but it just shows just how mixed we all are. The same could be said with with the Kennedys of Scotland as well, from the Kennetics, another Brythonic family with a Gaelic name or Gallic name. So, and like say, the language didn't change to Gaelic till the 14th century. So, you know, up until the 14th century, there was much more understanding from a Kerry man, from the Divness to the Campbells. They would have understood each other. So, yeah, it's like saying not only break away in the 14th century. It's still fairly recent. Oh, Glencoe, and they're talking about now the Glencoe and Culloden when they talk about the Campbells. Yes, another the back of the street.
I just want to finish off my main points on this just before because we just have 5 minutes left, and then I just want to finish off 1 or 2 questions. If we haven't answered the question, no, we'll probably cover it again next week, because next week we look to cover who are the Anglo-Irish. So just make sure to pop your question down below. So if we don't cover it, we'll definitely cover it next week. But let me just finish my main point of this presentation tonight. Just to highlight, I was just saying that we have those influences that come in with the Normans. Once again, it's decided to highlight Micheál and not myself. But regardless, you'll have to just enjoy Micheál's face. Actually, I think it might be better if we switch over to this one. Yeah, there we get a way more better view of Art MacMorrough Cavanagh. Now, this is Art MacMorrough Cavanagh in 1399 when he was fighting Richard II, which, thank God, we can now celebrate that he actually beat back over to England. Regardless, the reason why I'm showing you the image of Art MacMorrough Cavanagh is to highlight the fact that even in the 14th century, he is still wearing Gaelic clothing. Which is very, very interesting, given that the MacMorroughs at this point and the Fitzpatricks are surrounded by the Anglo-Irish, and yet we're still getting this idea, especially the MacMorroughs, that they're still dressing in Gaelic clothing, although the O'Byrnes and the O'Tooles, that they're kind of going between the two worlds at times of the Anglo-Irish world, but they're still dressing in their Gaelic clothing, which is definitely something to take note of, in my opinion. And then when we look up to the northwest of the island of Ireland, once again highlighting Micheál, we can see this image that's also from the 15th century as well, which depicts a Gaelic family at the time. This clothing, by the way, that you can see what the father is wearing, you can find that all over the island of Ireland. We have finds to support this is exactly how the Gaelic were dressing at the time. Rachel from the Creative Contessa is far more qualified when it comes down to clothing at the time. So hopefully around December 8, I can get herself and Dr. Melissa Shields over to the channel, and we can elaborate on this clothing still further. But just to take note that this style pops up again and again, and it's very interesting as well that this style also pops up in the Scottish court as well during the 15th century, this Gaelic Irish clothing. So it's not the case of, you know, the English come in and then the Gael are suddenly being influenced and are dressing more and more English. No, they still have their own unique style of dress and clothing and the way that they're dressing at the time, which is different to the English. So when they're talking about the Wild Irish, they're not talking about people who are dressed in fur running around half naked. No, this is the clothing that they're talking about, that they're identifying as the Wild Irish, which, to be quite honest with you, compared to English clothing of the 15th century, I think this is way more awesome. I actually love this style of clothing. Even the tartan pants that you can see here is absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion. At the same time, as you guys were pointing out, the Normans become more Irish than the Irish themselves. Yes, this is actually true to a certain degree. As we can see here with the de Burgh, this book is written by the de Burghs, and here they're depicted going off to do in cattle riding style clothing, that they're wearing Anglo-Irish armor. This armor is completely unique to English armor. And don't get me wrong, they have multiple sets of armor. So when they campaign in the Wars of the Roses in France and England, that they're wearing English armor, English style armor, but at the same time, they also have their own unique Anglo-Irish armor as well. Another depiction seen here. And you can see this furthermore. I'll go into way more detail about this, obviously, next week when it comes down to Anglo-Irish armor. And here's a depiction of English armor, if I can get that into more detail. There you go. This is English armor that you would have seen in England that the Anglo-Irish would have also had. But at the same time, they also, not only do they have this English identity, but they also have this Anglo-Irish identity. So it does give into question of, you know, what it is to be Irish at the time. But as Dr. Owen O'Neill has pointed out, these people are still identifying themselves as English. So it is very, very questionable. And it's definitely something we'll have to get into more detail about next week when we go into the question of who are the Anglo-Irish. So if you guys definitely in the comment section want to elaborate on this still further, definitely leave your questions for next week as we delve into deeper about the topic of who are the Anglo-Irish, because there definitely seems, if we look at Gaelic clothing and then we look at the clothing and armor of the Anglo-Irish, there definitely does seem to be something there. So we'll definitely have to leave our questions and stuff for next week as we elaborate still further. And I just want to thank Dr. Owen O'Neill and Micheál from Clans and Dynasties for coming on to my channel today and all the information you guys have provided. Is there anything else you guys want to elaborate on before I finish up on this live stream that we had today?
I just do Caveman had mentioned a point about, I think, the organization of Irish clans. I'm a bit dubious about that because they follow primogeniture. It's a very Anglicized, the organization of Irish chiefs, the direct descendants of Gaelic nobility. They're descendants of some Gaelic nobility following English law, following primogeniture. It's a bit of an invention, to say the least. There are people who have descendants, but there's much more people who have descendants than these.
Yeah, I just want to touch on, if you...
Yeah, go on.
Your image there with the 15th century Scottish, and it sort of ties into the point I was saying earlier about Scotland, is I believe that's the MacDonald's court, and the MacDonalds are famous for being descended from a Norse descent, but they spent so much time and energy to prove that they were of Irish descent. And they even brought in bards and brehons into their court. They really became, a lot of people would say Temple Bar in Dublin is the Irish tourist trap. Everything's just Irish, muck Irish and so on. Well, the MacDonalds were that of the 14th and 15th century. Even though they were of Norse descent paternally, they really wanted to be of Irish descent, and they really kind of over-egged it a bit. But from doing that, if anything, they they kept the Gaelic order in Scotland alive that wee bit longer. So, but it's just interesting that you show a Scottish one, and it just made me think about how connected the Ireland and Scotland were. Well, sometimes it was really overly fabricated, like.
Right. Anything else we want to elaborate on before I just finish up on this one? And I really do appreciate all the questions, and I just want to apologize to any questions we didn't get to elaborate on. Definitely keep your questions for next week, and we'll try to elaborate still further. And any questions, because you guys were asking questions about different families and clans and stuff as well. Micheál from Clans and Dynasties, if you're coming over from Owen O'Neill's channel or my channel, Irish Medieval History, go over to Clans and Dynasties channel on YouTube and subscribe to his. He elaborates on all of the clans and families of Ireland all the time, and you even do a live stream. When do you do your live stream, Micheál, on Clans and Dynasties?
I do. Tuesdays is live stream. Wednesdays is you guys, and Thursdays is members and super fans. So if you pay I think it's 99p. I don't charge a lot. Then I do a members only, which is deep dive family history. So a lot more localized. Just while I'm quickly touching on it, someone did say about the Campbells being of some of Irish descent. I do have a video on this, a short form video, but yes, there are native unrelated Irish families who now have the surname Campbell. One of them is McCowell. They changed the name to Campbell in the 15th, 16th century. So yes, you are correct.
Nice.
Stuff like that you will see on my channel.
was someone asking about the Ryans as well earlier?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
God,
I think I seen that one. But what we'll do is we'll say if you want Micheál to elaborate on the Ryans, Micheál can actually give you a full hour talk next Tuesday and stuff over on his channel. So
yeah,
make sure to
come
go
on
over to
Tuesday.
Micheál, and we'll leave it then to elaborate on that one. And also the same one with the other discussions as well with the RIB and all that stuff. Just head on over to Micheál, and Micheál will elaborate on all that stuff for you guys, because we're going over the 4-minute mark now. And if there's no other questions you guys want to proper elaborate within the topic itself of the Irish identity, what we'll do now is we'll just start finishing up. If you guys want to support Micheál from Clans and Dynasties, I think you're just taking right now subscriptions on YouTube, isn't it? You're not taking any Patreon or anything right now for the time being, are you?
No, just subscriptions on TikTok or YouTube are totally fine. To help support the channel would be greatly appreciated. But thank you.
Owen O'Neill, how do we support your work?
Through YouTube, or I have a Buy Me a Coffee account, which is on all my videos. I'm doing a live stream tomorrow. It's probably at 8 because I discovered today I have a parent-teachers meeting tomorrow. So I was not planning this, so it's messed things up. And then I have a video on the Irish famine coming out on Saturday, probably at 4. So
yeah, so
hiding after that.
Yeah. So when it comes down to anything to do with the Gaelic world or anything that we were talking about today with the Irish identity and stuff, Owen O'Neill is definitely your man to talk to. So anything we didn't get to cover today, definitely head on over to, what time is it going to be tomorrow, roughly?
Tomorrow, it'll be questions and answers on Irish history. I'm doing it once a week, sometimes Tuesday. I've been trying Tuesday at 7, but this week was crazy. So it'll be tomorrow at 8.
Yeah. 8 o'clock. Right. Fair. That's Irish time as well. So 8 o'clock. I'm not sure what time that will be over in the States and stuff.
I think it's 3 p.m. New York
3
time.
p.m. Yeah. Oh yeah. Fair enough. So about 3 p.m. New York time, and then Irish time around 8 o'clock. Owen O'Neill will cover his live stream. So anything we get to cover today, and if you want to support him, definitely head on over to his coffee. What I'll do for next week, I was meant to do it this week, is actually have all of our ways of supporting the channel and stuff, because we do a lot of work and stuff, so it's nice to get appreciated in that way. And also, if you want to support my work as well over in Irish medieval history, the best way to actually do it is to head on over to my Patreon. You can either give a small amount over to me. The reason why I would always highlight Patreon is because they take the smallest percentage. YouTube take huge percentage off. Buy Me Coffee is also very, very, very good as well. When it comes down to those whole percentages and everything. But at the same time, I do understand your argument that you guys make, that it's easier to subscribe to YouTube. So in the future, once this is all set up, I'll set up the YouTube subscription as well for you guys that just want to make lives easier for yourself, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. But at the same time, if you do want to support my channel, head on over to my Patreon. You can give as low as £3 a month. It doesn't really matter. It's just, the token that really means a lot to me, to be quite honest with you. But at the same time, I also do channels over on Patreon as well. This week now, all the way up to June, I'll be covering Ireland in the High Middle Ages, Ireland in the 13th century, which is covering St. John, what was it, King John in Ireland? I'm sorry to call him a bloody saint, the worst man on the planet. King John in Ireland. I'll be covering that topic to start off with. I'll be covering William Marshall and Isabel de Clare and how they pretty much fixed the administration of Ireland before going into the likes of the Barons Wars, Brian O'Neill's Revolt, the Tamad Wars, and then eventually getting up to the meat of the subject, which is the Scottish Wars of Independence, especially Edward the Bruce's invasion of Ireland. And then that should be up around June. So June next year is when I'm finishing up my classes. And if you want to sign up for that, definitely head on over to my Patreon. It's absolutely magnificent, to be honest with you. I'm having a great time. Maybe the people listening to me are sick of my voice, but I'm having a fun time anyway. That's the main thing. So if you want to be a part of that, definitely head on over to my Patreon. But other than that, guys, thank you so much for all the support. It really does mean the world to us. Other than that, guys, thanks very much, and slán go bhfuil. Wave there, Micheál, yeah.
Sorry, I'm telling people what channels to go to.
I seen that. All right, busy out. Anyway, see you guys.